Hi everyone, my name's Mandy, and I have been working on the area of educator mental health for about 9 or 10 years. I was an elementary educator, and then an instructional coach, and then a director of innovation and technology for a school district, but really got out of teaching, out of the classroom, because I was burnt out and really demoralized, and so I had to go through my own journey of re-engaging back into education, wanting to love my job. And I took that along with a lot of research and talking to a lot of people to start to advocate and defend for educator wellness, even way before the pandemic, because it's kind of always been an issue. And so that's really what I do now. I mean, I do consulting full-time, a little bit of ed tech, but mostly educator and adult SEL.
Wow. You're pretty modest because you are also an author. You left that out.
Yep. I've written a few books about innovation and divergent thinking and actually how it relates back to educator emotional engagement. And so, and then I have a few books on educator mental health as well. Yep.
Did you hear that? I have a couple of other books. Some of us are struggling to get the first one done and under our belts. And you've got, how many? 5?
I have 4, but the 5th is on its way soon.
Oh, wow. Table for 5. Well, congratulations on all your success. I applaud you, and all jokes aside, I really appreciate everything that you bring to the table for our educational space. You do a lot for education. I see your social media posts on Instagram, on Facebook, and things like that, and you're very well much about the mental headspace, the igniting that fire within teachers. And I see what I did there.
Yeah, I see what you did.
And
hashtag title.
That's right. Yeah. So I have a great deal of respect for everything that you do. Now, while you're here at FETC. Are you presenting on this particular topic?
Yeah, so I actually presented this morning already with Ken Shelton. We did a 2-hour workshop on supporting educator wellness and through identity discovery and ways that educators can be emotionally disengaged, kind of level setting on some terms that we use a lot and sometimes interchangeably, like trauma and SEL and those types of things. And so doing some level setting on those things, along with taking a look at yourself and your own self-awareness and what does that mean. So we did that this morning, and then I also have a session for EverFi coming up talking a little bit about educator mental health. That's only about a 20-minute session, but
okay, all right. So you mentioned a little bit earlier when you were giving your intro piece that you kind of went through that as a teacher.
I did. So there's a lot of pieces to that, like anybody's mental health story, I think there's the piece of me and how I identify as a child who lived in an abusive household, and I had mental health issues due to that. And so I was a teacher who had been an abused kid who was trying to do better for kids than I had at home and understanding their home lives and things. But at the end of the day, like I couldn't talk about that. I couldn't talk about my depression and anxiety, my suicidal ideation. Like I couldn't talk about those things because we don't talk about that as educators. Like if I know this is a podcast, I'm going to be using air quotes all over the place, like if you have mental health issues as an educator, you are considered weird, and students might quote unquote catch what you have. And to be totally honest, we haven't come very far in 10 years when it comes to that kind of thinking. We've just started to destigmatize, but it's still very much seen as a profession where the people who are in it should be, again, quote unquote, better than mental health issues. And so when I disengaged, I didn't have any kind of support when it came to that. So I was in the classroom trying to deal with my own healing and trying to do good things for the world and dealing with all of the things that teachers deal with on a daily basis, the structure of education in general, how society looks at at you everything from financial issues because I didn't make enough money, so like we have all of those things happening. And I slowly, it happens over time. It sneaks up on you. You don't expect to really dislike the job that you went into with your whole heart. Like you don't expect to wake up one day and go, oh my gosh, I don't want to be here anymore. And so from that standpoint, I didn't have a pathway. There was nobody who was paving the way for me to talk about the things that I needed to talk about, to be vulnerable, to open myself up without judgment. There's nobody doing those things. And I felt called to be the one to start to open up those conversations. And I'm happy to say that now we're not in the space, like when I first started talking about mental health, I got a lot of pushback from every which way.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, a ton. People telling me not to talk about, nobody wants to talk about sad teachers. I'm going to get people fired. Nobody should be talking about that.
Put on a happy face.
Yeah. Just tell them to get over it. They shouldn't be bringing their problems to work, all of these types of things. And I felt like, they were throwing out, it's sort of it reminds me of the equivalent of like when you say, my depression is acting up right now, and somebody says, well, just be strong and get over it. It's that kind of spiritual bypass that people do to each other. And it's kind of what's been happening to educators for years when it comes to their mental health is, well, you're resilient, you're strong, you're there for the right reasons, you have a moral obligation. And we throw these things out and we kind of weaponize it against the people who are feeling all of these emotions. So that's how I became an advocate.
Wow. Well, you literally lived it.
Yeah.
You literally lived it. So this is not a quote unquote, and I hate to use quote unquote because you did say there's going to be a lot of air quotes.
I know, because I don't ever want anyone to think that what I'm saying, people take what you say as what you're saying sometimes. It's like, no.
Yeah, but you didn't take the term of mental health, of teacher wellness, of just overall, spiritual goodness, both, physical, spiritual, mental, all that stuff. You didn't kind of jump on that bandwagon like we've seen some educators do. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a hot topic. Let me kind of, go and give my 2 cents that might not be authentic.
Yeah.
But you came from that.
Right.
You overcame, and I don't want to use the word overcame because you never really overcome that stuff, but you kind of use it as your engine, your motor behind you that's pushing you to help people who are going through this. So I'm tipping my hat to you.
Oh,
I almost brought I didn't bring a hat, but I was going to bring a hat. And if I brought it, I'm virtually tipping.
Next time you're wearing a hat, just tip it and be like, this is for Mandy.
I'll tip it to the north because you are in Wisconsin, right?
And I'll know.
Wisconsin?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll tip it way up north. Okay. So, I tip my hat to you and everything that you do. And it's it is a taboo topic. Mm-hmm. And I will say from a male perspective, a male educator, it's even more I think it's even more difficult for us
for sure
to open up about that stuff and talk about anxiety and depression and at times the disconnect that we might have with our passion and why we got into this field to begin with. Suck it up. Yeah. Suck it up. Get over it.
Yep. Be a man.
You're a man. Mm-hmm. You're the quote unquote. Oh, there it is again. I did it again.
We should start like ding.
We should, right? Yeah. I think I got some here. There we go. So you're supposed to be the strong one. You're the backbone. As a male, you're the backbone of the family when it comes to being the rock. The emotional rock and that, and it's, at times you put on the happy face, you push it down and, hoping that it's not going to come up, but in some sort of way, it's going to come back.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be in the healthiest of ways to release.
Right.
So speaking of that, like when you feel, when you start getting overwhelmed with your 8th book or whatever book you're on right now, and, travel, I'm assuming you do a lot of traveling, mm-hmm. and you do have kids.
Yes.
It could be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
What does Mandy do to kind of get back to reality, to help focus and kind of align everything so that you're in a good place or a better place.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the most important things to understand about this work, and when I say work, I mean like the internal dealing with your emotions, trying to work through the things that are happening to you on a day-to-day basis. The most important thing to remember is that you can know everything and still fall into the trap of becoming burnt out or demoralized or whatever it is. Like, I'm an advocate. I talk about this all the time. For the last 6 months, I've been really struggling with my mental health. I'm very self-aware. I have all the strategies. I know to check everything from my vitamin D level to how much I'm drinking water to how much I'm interacting with certain people. I know all these things, and I still struggled the last 6 months. And so I think that why I think that's important is because I've always looked at my mental health as, you know, I'm going to have good times and I'm going to have bad times, and that's just inevitable. Yeah. Like that's why having strategies and trying different things it's so important. And my friends were kind of laughing at me because one of the things that got me into the position that I got into is that during the pandemic, I was trying to do all the things for Educator mental health because, like, I knew it was the only thing I had to give back. Like, it was the only way I had to help, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to do all these things, and I was working a lot. And so I you know, checked myself with my own knowledge and said, you're working too much. You need to slow down on the work. Well, we all know that things just don't get done when that happens. And then I had to work through my guilt because that's the product of creating boundaries was guilt, right? Mm-hmm. And so then I got to one day I put my work away and I was sitting on the couch and I'm watching TV, and I don't even like watching TV, but I had nothing else to do. And so, like, these are all, again, just talking about strategies I have to deal. One of my strategies right then and there was, well, I need to think about the last time I was doing something that made me really happy, thinking I'm going to go down this path of, you know, I need to reawaken whatever that piece was. And the thing I could think of was when I was a teenager and I used to horseback ride. And I was like, I'm buying a horse. And I bought a horse. And like that's it's kind of like the strategy to the 10th degree. But I was like, nope, if I'm going down this road of telling people that they need to do what makes them happy, you know, gosh darn it, I'm going to do what makes me happy. And but it's important to have strategies like that you can fall back on when you see you're doing certain things, so that you can move yourself forward.
So some people walk, some people cook, some people start pumping iron at the gym.
Play pickleball.
Mandy said, I'm getting a horse. Male or female?
It's male. And although the first time that he threw me off and I landed on my back, I did say to somebody else at the stables, I'm like, next time I'm playing pickleball. Like, I don't know what I was thinking. But he's a gated spotted saddle horse, and he's gorgeous. But we're getting to know each other. So.
How long have you had this animal? This horse?
About a month and a half.
Oh, this is recent.
This is recent. Yep.
You got a 2023.
Yeah.
You got a.
Yep.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So.
No pun intended. I should have said holy horse. Wow. So you bought a horse, and he already bucked you off.
He already almost put me in the hospital. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was impressive, but he.
What's impressive? Yeah, that he almost put you in the hospital?
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
It was
please.
It was a really good lesson in, like, remember when things happen to you when you're 14 and you hit the ground and you bounce back up and you're like, let's do it again. Yeah. And they're like, yeah. And then 30 years later, I'm like, you don't bounce at all. Like, not even a little bit. So instead you lay there and groan until you can get your breath back. But I mean, it's an extreme story, but it's from the standpoint of like, I needed to be self-aware enough to walk myself down that path, because nobody was going to do it for me.
Yeah. You took the initiative. You grabbed it by the reins.
I did. I did. And then I fell off it.
And then you fell off it.
And then
And you got right back up.
Yeah. So
took a little while, but you eventually got back up. Oh my gosh.
That in itself a good analogy, getting back on the horse.
That is, that is, I've heard a lot of great stories on this podcast, but that is by far one of the coolest things I've heard yet. So you grew up with horses?
I did. I had my own horse growing up, and it's kind of funny because now at my age, I like to believe I'm a little bit smarter, and people would say to me, well, what training did you have? Did you ever go to lessons? And I'm like, no. I bought my horse from an auction. We had no background knowledge on it. It got off its trailer, and my mother threw me on it and was like, get going. And and just going back to like the 80s and 90s, and that's what you did. Like, you didn't get training. You didn't put helmets on. Like, we didn't wear helmets.
You didn't sign an affidavit.
No, I didn't sign anything. I just got on. And so the only time that she ever taught me a lesson was that she jumped on the back of it and pulled me off, and she's like, there, now you know how to fall. But that was the only lesson I had. But that there was never a happier time in my life that I did stuff that was just for me. And, I do other things that make me happy. Like, I love watching my kids do things. I love being a part of their lives, obviously, but that's my identity as a mother. That's not necessarily my identity as Mandy that is doing those things, even though obviously they cross. I love doing those things. It's kind of for them, even though I enjoy it. It's not for me.
You get joy and satisfaction from seeing them create their own moments, create their own things that eventually down the road will make them they'll recall
on a podcast.
If they still exist at that time. But but you did something for you.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Good for you. Good for you. Wow. It's crazy when you were talking about that story about your mother throwing you on a horse, not throwing you on a horse, but putting you on a horse. I've ridden a horse once in my life. I don't recall how old I was, but it was in the San Fernando Valley, which is north of Los Angeles. My uncle had I don't know if it was a ranch, but he had some land out there. And I remember my dad took me with my uncle, his brother, to that land, ranch, whatever you want to call it, and he put me on the horse. And it literally bucked me off. I landed on my back. All the breath I had came out, and it was one of those where I wanted to cry.
Yeah, and you can't.
And nothing came out. And I remember he got on that horse, and he took total control of that animal, and it did whatever he wanted him to do. Mm-hmm. And it was like a movie, a little kid watching his dad just take that horse by the reins and just go. And it was one of the coolest things I had ever seen in my life. And as you were saying that, I recalled that memory in my head. Yeah. So, oh man, that is nuts. That is nuts. So obviously I'm going to ask you this question. I know you probably get it a lot, and it varies from person to person. And I'm pretty sure we kind of all know somewhat of what the answer is going to be, but to any educator, to any person out there, even not an educator, but anyone out there who's listening or watching a clip or what have you, what advice do you give them for maybe disconnecting, maybe falling out of love with a passion or something that they're doing, whether it's professional or personal, and they're starting to go down that path of not being in a good mental space? What advice do you have for them?
Sure. I think that my first piece of advice, I probably have actually two that go hand in hand.
All right.
One of them is to be curious about what's happening in your emotions that's making you disconnect from whatever that is.
Okay.
So asking, what is it about this situation that's really making me struggle? Is it literally the whole situation, or is it a part of the situation? Is there anything that can be done about that? Are you sort of disenchanted with your job, for example,
Yeah.
as a teacher, and but you find that your disenchantment is actually with some of the policies in the district. Is it possible to move districts? I mean, goodness, everybody's looking for teachers right now. Is it
Yeah.
possible to move districts and, give it a try there before you're so completely dispassionate about everything that you're doing? In my opinion, the things that are happening to teachers that over and over again are creating this issue,
Yeah.
this emotional issue is, like is creating these wounds in teachers. Like they don't want to feel this way about their jobs. And so being curious about what it is that's happening and trying to isolate what that is, really looking at it through, looking at it through a different lens, try like something to see what's actually happening around you. Writing things down if you have to, like things that pop in your head. Usually if you ask yourself a question, the first thing that pops in your head is the thing that should be analyzed. Why was that the first thing? What made you think that way?
Yeah.
Why is that your go-to? And then the second thing I would say is knowing yourself well enough to be able to, to think through the feelings and emotions that you have. So this is a really simple example, but I think it's also a pretty common one. When I get really angry or frustrated, I cry. If you looked at me and you saw me, you'd be like, oh, she's super sad. Nope. I know myself well enough that I just know I am really ticked off. Like I am so angry and so frustrated. And a lot of times I also know that I get angry and frustrated when I feel like I don't have control of my surroundings. Why? Because I, as a child, grew up, I didn't have control of my surroundings. And so now if I feel like I'm losing control of my surroundings, I get really, really angry and I cry. So just because I'm crying about a situation doesn't even necessarily mean that I'm sad about that particular situation or that I'm necessarily angry about that situation. I am angry at my feeling of the lack of control that I have in that situation. And so being able to really dial down and like almost weave through all of your emotions and thoughts and feelings and stuff that's happening is such an important thing to be able to do in order to start healing and moving forward.
That speaks volumes right now, because a lot of people tend to think when they're upset about something, it's the entire situation. But when you really start to scaffold,
right,
and you pinpoint what exactly it is that you're upset about or you don't agree with, or maybe struck a nerve or struck a certain chord with you, and if you can isolate and identify that, then that puts you in a better place to identify the trigger and figure out a way in which you can either avoid it or react to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because honestly, like I always say, learn your strategies, but strategies aren't going to do you any good if you can't pinpoint what the issue is.
Yeah.
And, like I can have strategies all day to not feel angry, but if I can't work my way back to knowing why I'm getting angry in the first place, the only thing I'm going to do is at some point, I'm going to just keep stopping myself from getting angry, which is going to make it build up, like you said.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden at one point come out in some way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so important to be able to backtrack and figure out what those, like we all have wounds. We all do. And so like being able to backtrack and know like what your triggers are, knowing how you start feeling. And I've found out over time that even if you do a really good job of knowing it about a specific instance or area, as you start to heal, the way that you react and the way that looks can change. And so it's just about, mental health is such in some ways such a frustrating concept because it's so individualized, it's so specific, and nobody can actually tell you how it works.
It's all theoretical too. It's not tangible. It's not like
yeah. The only thing that's even remotely tangible is the brain-based stuff that they've the neurological things that they know and that kind of thing. But I mean, how many people are privy to that information without going in and so Yeah. So those would be the two suggestions that I have.
So you heard it from Mandy herself, ladies and gentlemen. If you're watching, listening on any platform, how can people connect with you on the internets?
So you can find me at www.mandyfroehlich.com, or my last name is a mess to spell. So it's also www.divergentedu.com. I'm also at Froehlich M, and that's FROEHLICHM on the Twitters. And then Froehlich Mandy on Instagram, and Divergent EDU on Facebook.
All right.
Like I'm missing something, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you hit them all. And we'll just hit up divergentedu.com and
and you can get them all there.
Yeah,
Yep.
Absolutely. I had you on the podcast, oh gosh, almost 2 years ago now.
That's crazy.
Virtual. And you were talking about like taco recipes and things like that. And we're in person. I got to ask you again, corn or flour?
Flour.
Flour.
Although I prefer nachos, honestly, or taco dip. Like I'm not.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Coke or Pepsi?
Coke for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm saying that because I see your Coke over there. So
definitely.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode, special episode, great episode, one that we can't hear enough about, the topic of mental health and everything going on with educator well-being and everything that has to deal with. I'm trying to think of the right words.
Yeah.
Everything having to do with making yourself better and making your mental headspace a little bit more positive. This idea of a perfect world where you're not going to have any conflict and nothing's ever going to happen to you, you can kiss that goodbye.
Yeah.
in this life, you're going to go through pains. You're going to be hurt. You are going to inadvertently hurt other people as well, and you're going to have to learn how to deal with stuff and triggers, identifying those triggers, how you react, how other people react to you and with you, and you got to keep just becoming a better person. My whole motto is I'm not trying to be the best podcaster. I'm not trying to be the best instructional specialist or what have you. I'm trying to be better today than I was yesterday.
Right.
That's it.
You are your own competition.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time and
you.
all your knowledge, Mandy. I wish you the best in all of your future ventures.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
Again.